7 things to tell yourself every morning. Let's start with what actually happens when you wake up. Before your feet hit the floor, before you check your phone, before you brush your teeth, your mind starts talking. It says, what do I have to do today? Did I reply to that? I shouldn't have said that yesterday. This is going to be stressful. I'm already behind. Before your feet hit the floor, your brain had already pulled up yesterday's unfinished argument, the bill you haven't paid, the thing your boss said, the weight you haven't lost, the text you're dreading, that low-grade anxiety that just lives in your chest now. And here's what's terrifying about this. You didn't choose a single one of those thoughts. They chose you. Your mind hijacked the most neurologically valuable minutes of your entire day and used them to rehearse your fears. Most people don't wake up and create their day. They wake up and inherit their anxiety. And the problem isn't that your mind speaks in the morning. The problem is that you let it speak unchecked. What you tell your mind in the first minutes of your day sets the emotional direction of the next 16 hours. And that is not spiritual exaggeration. That's neurological fact. Most people think the morning is just the start of the day. It's not. The morning is the start of your operating system. What runs in those first minutes doesn't just affect your mood, it architecturally shapes how your brain will process every single event, conversation, and decision for the next 16 hours. And the worst part? You've been handing over the keys to this process every single day. To anxiety, to dread, to mental clutter you never asked for. Today, that stops. By the end of this video, I'm going to give you 7 things to tell your mind every morning. And I want you to wait till the last one because each one is propulsive and helps the one before. Now, I need to be clear about something before we go any further. This is not positive thinking. This is not stand in front of a mirror and say I am rich and abundant until the universe delivers. These are not affirmations. They're not, I am a powerful manifesting being of light. I'm talking about specific cognitive instructions, each one backed by peer-reviewed neuroscience and ancient wisdom that understood the architecture of the mind thousands of years before we had brain scanners. The affirmation approach can fail because your brain has a built-in nonsense detector, the anterior cingulate cortex. And when you say something you don't actually believe, it flags the contradiction and creates more internal resistance, not less. Studies from the University of Waterloo found that people with low self-esteem who repeated positive affirmations actually felt worse afterwards, not better. So I'm not asking you to lie to yourself. What I'm asking you to recognize is that you are already talking to yourself every single morning, non-stop. The question was never, should I talk to my own mind? You don't have a choice. Psychologists estimate that we have over 6,000 thoughts per day, and the vast majority of them are repetitive, automatic, and unchecked. You've been running a script every morning for years. You just never wrote it. Someone else did. Your fears, your past, your parents, your failures, your social media feed. All I'm saying is, if the conversation is already happening, if the monologue is already running, then you should probably be the one choosing the words. This isn't woo-woo, this is common sense combined with neuroscience. You're not adding something new, you're replacing something that was already there and doing it with precision instead of accident. But first, you need to understand why the morning matters this much. Because once you understand the science and the ancient framework behind it, you'll never waste another morning again. In the Vedic tradition, one of the oldest continuous knowledge systems on the planet, there is a concept called Brahma Muhurta. It translates roughly to the creator's hour. It refers to the period approximately 90 minutes before sunrise. But the broader principle extends to the first hours of waking. The ancient texts, including the Ashtanga Hridayam and the Charaka Samhita, foundational texts of Ayurvedic medicine dating back over 5,000 years, prescribe this period as the single most important window for shaping the mind. Not because of mysticism, because of observation. These traditions notice something through thousands of years of disciplined introspection. The mind in the early morning is in a state they called sattva, a quality of clarity, receptivity, and stillness. It's the mental equivalent of calm water. Whatever you drop into calm water creates a clear, powerful ripple. Whatever you drop into the turbulent water disappears. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali describe the untrained morning mind as having minimal mental fluctuations. The mind hasn't yet been bombarded by stimuli, social input, and reactive patterns. This is why every serious contemplative tradition on earth, Buddhist, Stoic, Vedic, Christian monastic, Sufi, place their deepest practices at dawn. Not by coincidence, by design. They understood that the morning mind is not just fresher, it is structurally different. And now modern neuroscience confirms exactly why. When you wake up, your brain transitions through specific brainwave states. During the first 20 to 30 minutes after waking, your brain is predominantly in a theta to alpha wave transition. Theta waves between 4 and 8 hertz are the same brainwave state used in hypnotherapy. Alpha waves between 8 and 12 hertz are associated with relaxed but alert awareness. Here's why this matters. In this theta alpha state, your brain's prefrontal cortex, the rational executive function center, is not yet fully online. But your limbic system, the emotional brain, particularly the amygdala, is already active. This creates a window where emotional and subconscious processing is heightened while your critical filter is still waking up. Dr. Bruce Lipton's research at Stanford on cellular biology, along with work from the Laboratory of Neuroimaging at USC, shows that this transitional brainwave state is when the subconscious mind is most programmable. It's the same reason hypnotherapy works, reduced critical faculty combined with heightened suggestibility. But it goes deeper than brainwaves. In the first hour of waking, your body produces a natural cortisol spike called the cortisol awakening response, or CAR. Researchers at the University of Westminster and the Technical University of Dresden have extensively studied this. The CAR is not stress. It's your body's neurochemical preparation for the day. It enhances memory consolidation, sharpens attention, and primes your hippocampus for learning. But here's the critical finding. The content of your first thoughts interacts with this cortisol spike. If those first thoughts are anxious, ruminative, or fear-based, the CAR becomes fuel for your threat detection system. The amygdala uses that cortisol to reinforce hypervigilance. But if those first thoughts are intentional, structured, and directed, the CAR becomes fuel for focus, resilience, and cognitive flexibility. So the ancients were right. The morning mind is different. It's more receptive, more programmable, and more consequential than any other period of your day. And right now, most of us are flooding it with social media, news alerts, and unconscious dread. Let's fix that. The 7 things to tell your mind. The first thing to tell your mind in the morning is I am awake before my problems. They do not get to speak first. Here's why this works. Cognitive psychology has a well-documented phenomenon called the Zeigarnik effect. The brain preferentially recalls unfinished tasks and unresolved problems. Your mind doesn't bring up yesterday's worries because you're a negative person. It does because neurologically, open loops create tension that the brain is driven to resolve. When you wake up, your default mode network, the brain system most active during mind-wandering and self-referential thought, immediately starts cycling through these open loops. Research from Washington University shows that the default mode network is what creates that stream of uninvited morning thoughts. By making a conscious declaration that you speak first, not your problems, you are performing what neuroscientists call a pattern interrupt. You're inserting a top-down prefrontal intervention into what is otherwise a bottom-up limbic-driven process. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius began every morning with the explicit practice of pre-framing his day. In Meditations, he writes that he told himself each morning he would encounter difficult people and difficult circumstances, not to dread them, but to strip them of the power of surprise. He chose to define the terms of engagement before the day could define them for him. See, today we're told, say things like, today's going to be a great day. And the moment you see evidence in your day that doesn't feel great, the gray clouds, the person who didn't smile at you, your colleagues who's in a bad mood, you think to yourself, it's not going to be a great day. Marcus Aurelius thought about it the opposite way. He knew there were going to be difficult encounters. What that did is it took away the element of surprise and actually prepared him to be ready for it. Here's how to implement this. Before you pick up your phone, Before you check anything, place your hand on your chest and say out loud or internally, I am awake before my problems. I speak first today. This should happen before your feet touch the floor. It takes 3 seconds. Those 3 seconds redirect the trajectory of the cortisol awakening response from anxiety into agency. Ancient wisdom teaches self-mastery over reaction. In the Bhagavad Gita, equanimity, not emotionlessness, but steadiness is power. Today we think, if I'm detached and disconnected, if I avoid an emotion, then I'm powerful. The ancient wisdom tradition suggests it's not about being emotionless, it's about steadiness. And neuroscience agrees. When you pause before reacting, you activate the prefrontal cortex, which regulates impulse and emotional response. Without intention, your amygdala drives the day. Here's a practical step. Stop starting your day with your phone, because that's not checking messages. That's letting someone else's priorities become your first thought. That's letting an algorithm decide what you feel before you've even decided how you feel. Stop starting your day with your phone because you didn't wake up anxious. You woke up neutral, and then you opened a screen and borrowed everyone else's chaos and called it being informed. You weren't informed, you were hijacked. Spring is here, and Springfest is happening now at Lowe's. If your yard needs a refresh, grab Stay Green Premium 2 cubic foot mulch, 5 bags for just $10. That's right, 5 bags for just $10 to help your landscaping look its best. And if you're heading indoors, you can save up to 40% off select major appliances, making it a great time to upgrade the machines that keep your home running. Whether you're working in the yard or tackling chores inside, our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Valid through April 22nd while supplies last. Selection varies by location. See Lowe's.com for details. Mulch offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii. The second thing to say to yourself when you wake up in the morning is, I am not yesterday. My brain is physically different than it was 24 hours ago. Here's why this works. This is not a pep talk. This is neurobiology. Dr. Eleanor Maguire's landmark research at University College London, along with decades of subsequent work in the field of neuroplasticity, confirms that your brain physically restructures itself every single day. Synaptic connections that were active yesterday are either strengthened or pruned during sleep. New proteins are synthesized. New neural pathways are available. You are literally, not figuratively, you are literally operating on a different piece of hardware than you were yesterday. The person who failed yesterday, who was anxious yesterday, who couldn't focus yesterday, had a different brain. This is measurable. The problem is that your narrative identity, your story about who you are, doesn't update at the same speed as your neurobiology. You're running old software on new hardware. And that old software says, I'm the person who always struggles with this. I'm the person who always fails. I'm the person who's lazy. Telling your mind, I am not yesterday, is a cognitive reappraisal technique. Dr. James Gross's research at Stanford on emotion regulation shows that reappraisal, reframing a situation before the emotional response locks in, is the single most effective strategy for emotional regulation. It is significantly more effective than suppression, distraction, or avoidance. Buddhism's core teaching of anicca, impermanence, is not a philosophy. It's perceptual training. The Buddha instructed practitioners to observe every morning that the self they inhabited yesterday has dissolved. Clinging to yesterday's identity was considered one of the primary causes of suffering, not because it's a nice idea, but because it is observably true. You are a process, not a fixed identity. Here's how to implement this. During your first 5 minutes awake, take 3 slow breaths. On each exhale, consciously let go of one thing from yesterday. A failure, a worry, a conflict. You're not suppressing it. You're acknowledging that the version of you that experienced it has physically changed. Say, that was a different brain. This one has new options. Do this consistently for 2 weeks and you will notice a measurable drop in morning rumination. The next thing to say to yourself when you wake up every morning is, today, I direct my attention. My attention is not available for hijacking. Here's why this works. Attention is not an abstract concept. It is a finite neurochemical resource governed primarily by 2 neurotransmitters. Dr. Michael Posner's attention network research identifies 3 distinct attention systems in the brain: the alerting network, the orienting network, and the executive control network. Every time you check a notification, scroll a feed, or entertain an uninvited worry, you are spending from this finite neurochemical budget. Dr. Gloria Mark's research at UC Irvine found that after a single distraction, it takes an average of 23 minutes and 15 seconds to return to the original task. Not because you're weak, but because attention re-engagement requires a full neurochemical reload. Here's what's worse. Your phone is not designed to inform you. It's designed by teams of engineers using variable ratio reinforcement schedules, the same operant condition pattern that makes slot machines the most addictive machines ever created. When you pick up your phone in the first hour, it's like walking into a Vegas casino, sitting at a slot machine, and playing the game. You're placing your attention at its most valuable and vulnerable state into a system specifically engineered to extract it. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjun that the disciplined mind is a person's greatest ally, and the undisciplined mind is their greatest enemy. The Sanskrit concept of dharana, concentration, is described not as a talent, but as trainable capacity. The Yoga Sutras explicitly state that the entire purpose of practice is the intentional direction of mental fluctuations. They understood that an undirected mind is not a free mind. It is a captured mind. Here's how to implement this. Do not touch your phone for the first 30 to 60 minutes after waking. Buy a $4 alarm clock so your phone is not in the room. During this protected window, decide with pen and paper if possible the 3 things that will receive your best attention today. Write them down. Not 10 things, just 3. This single act of prioritization activates your prefrontal cortex and puts it in the driver's seat before the limbic system can take over. Research from Dr. Gail Matthews at Dominican University found that people who write down their goals are 42% more likely to achieve them. You don't have a motivation problem. You picked up your phone before you picked up your life problem. You don't have a motivation problem. You gave your best energy to your screen problem. You answered everyone else's agenda before your own problem. You don't have a motivation problem. You never protected the only thing everyone is stealing from you problem. Remember that. The 4th thing to say to yourself every morning is, I will not solve problems that have not happened yet or don't exist yet. This is why this works. This targets the single most destructive mental habit human beings engage in: anticipatory rumination. A landmark study from Harvard psychologist Dr. Matthew Killingsworth and Dr. Daniel Gilbert, published in Science, tracked thousands of people in real time and found that the human mind wanders 47% of the time. And critically, that mind wandering predicted unhappiness regardless of the activity. But it gets more specific. The brain does not distinguish between a vividly imagined scenario and one that is actually occurring. Neuroimaging studies from the University of Colorado Boulder show that when you mentally rehearse a difficult conversation, your amygdala fires, your cortisol rises, and your body enters a low-grade stress response. You are physiologically experiencing an event that is not happening. Now, I want to make a caveat here. This is good if you're rehearsing it on purpose. If you're preparing for a difficult conversation at work, if you're preparing for a difficult conversation with your partner, but not one that hasn't happened yet, not one that doesn't exist, not a problem that you've created, invented, imagined, right? It's very different. Rehearsing for a play and a drama that you're going to perform on stage, which is actually happening, is different from inventing drama that hasn't happened or might not happen. You are paying the biological tax on a problem that may never arrive. Seneca wrote 2,000 years ago, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." This was not a platitude for him. It was a diagnostic observation. In Zen Buddhism, this is captured in the instruction, when sitting, sit. When walking, walk. Above all, don't wobble. The mind that is rehearsing tomorrow while living today is wobbling. And a wobbling mind is an exhausted mind. Here's how to implement this. When you catch yourself rehearsing a future conversation or spiraling into a what-if scenario, use a technique called temporal labeling. Say to yourself, that is a future thought. I am in the present. You're not suppressing the thought. You're tagging it accurately so your brain can deprioritize it. Practice this every morning and it will begin to generalize across your entire day within weeks. You're not stressed about your life. You're stressed about a version of your life that hasn't even happened yet. You're not stressed about your life. You're stressed about the argument you haven't had, the rejection you haven't gotten, the worst case that only exists in your head. Your body can't tell the difference. Your nervous system is paying full price for something that isn't real. You're not stressed about your life. You're stressed by your imagination. The fifth thing to say to yourself every morning is, my body is not a vehicle for my head. I will listen to my body today. Here's why it works. The modern default is to treat the body as a taxi that carries the brain to meetings. This is not just philosophically wrong, it's neurologically backwards. Your gut contains roughly 500 million neurons, the enteric nervous system, sometimes called the second brain. It produces over 90% of your body's serotonin and about 50% of your dopamine. The vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve in your body, carries signals from your gut, your heart, and your viscera up to the brain. And 80 to 90% of vagal traffic flows upward from body to brain, not the other direction. What this means is that your body is not just reacting to your thoughts, it's informing them. Dr. Antonio Damasio's somatic marker hypothesis, developed through decades of work at USC, demonstrates that bodily sensations are not separate from decision-making. They are a critical input. People with damage to the brain areas that process body signals make catastrophically poor decisions even when their logical reasoning is intact. When you ignore your body's signals, the tight jaw, the shallow breathing, the knot in the stomach, you are cutting off a primary data channel that your brain needs to function properly. In traditional Chinese medicine and in the Vedic system alike, the body was never considered separate from the mind. The concept of prana in yoga, life energy, is tracked through the body, not the intellect. The Taoist tradition describes the body as the root and the mind as the branches. If the root is neglected, the branches wither regardless of how much you tend to them. The Buddha's foundational meditation instruction, the discourse on the foundations of mindfulness, begins not with thoughts, not with emotions, but with the body. Body awareness is the first foundation because the ancient contemplatives recognize that an unembodied mind is an unstable mind. Here's how to implement this. Within the first 10 minutes of waking, do a 60-second body scan. Start at the top of your head and slowly move your awareness down through your face, your jaw, your neck, your shoulders, your chest, your abdomen, your hips, your legs, and feet. You're not trying to fix anything. You're simply registering what's there. Tension in your shoulders? Note it. Tightness in your gut? Acknowledge it. This practice activates the insular cortex. Your gut has been trying to tell you something for months. You keep ignoring it and wonder why you feel lost. Your gut has been trying to tell you something for a long time. That tightness in your chest wasn't random. That knot in your stomach before you said yes wasn't nothing. That exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix isn't laziness. Your gut is constantly trying to tell you something. You just keep scrolling past the answer, looking for it in someone else's content. This next one is really important. I want you to listen in. I choose one thing that matters over 10 things that are urgent. That's the sixth thing I want you to say. This principle attacks the single greatest productivity illusion of modern life, the equation of busyness with progress. The Eisenhower matrix, attributed to Dwight Eisenhower's observation that what is important is seldom urgent and what is urgent is seldom important, has been validated extensively in organizational psychology. But the neurological reality is even more stark. Your prefrontal cortex, which handles complex planning and prioritization, is a slow, energy-expensive system. Every notification, every quick question, every email marked with an exclamation point activates the limbic urgency pathway. And the brain, because it is wired for survival, will always default to the urgent over the important if you don't intervene. The concept of swadharma in the Bhagavad Gita, one's own duty or essential purpose, is not about doing more. It's about doing the right thing, even if it's difficult, rather than the comfortable or easy thing. The reason why we do the urgent thing is because often it's easier and comfortable. The reason we avoid the important thing is because it's harder and challenging. Krishna's instruction to Arjuna is essentially stop being distracted by all the things you could do. Do the one thing you must do. In the Zen tradition, there is the concept of ichigyo zamai, single-minded absorption in one activity. This is one of my favorite Zen teachings. The master does one thing at a time and completes them. The beginner does many things at the same time and never completes them. Here's how to implement this. Every morning, before you open your email or your task manager, answer one question on paper. If I could only accomplish one thing today and everything else would be forgiven, what would it be? Write that thing down. Circle it. That is your non-negotiable. Everything else is secondary. Protect at least 90 minutes for that one thing before you allow anything urgent to enter your field. Schedule it as a meeting with yourself if you must. Research from the Harvard Business Review found that professionals who set a single daily priority report significantly higher satisfaction and performance than those who manage long to-do lists. You're not lazy. You're just busy with the wrong things and calling it productivity. You're not lazy. You answered every email. You sat in every meeting. You said yes to everyone who asked. You were incredibly busy. You just weren't busy with the one thing that actually matters. The one thing you keep pushing to tomorrow. You're not lazy. You're hiding from the real work inside the fake work. And this last one will transform everything. Every morning I want you to say, I will not measure today by what I get, but by who I am while I do it. Here's why this works. This final instruction rewires the deepest layer of your motivational system, your relationship with outcomes. Dr. Carol Dweck's research at Stanford on mindset theory, one of the most replicated findings in modern psychology, shows that people who orient around a process, a growth mindset, consistently outperform people who orient around outcomes, a fixed mindset, across academic, professional, and personal domains. But the effect isn't just on performance. It's on resilience. Outcome-oriented people experience failure as identity-threatening. Process-oriented people experience failure as information. This is arguably one of the most important teachings in the Bhagavad Gita. Chapter 2, verse 47. You have a right to the work, but never to the fruit of the work. This is not passivity. It is the most sophisticated motivational technology ever articulated. It says, pour everything into the action, release attachment to the result. Not because results don't matter, but because attachment to results degrades the quality of the action itself. You don't get better at something by wanting better results. You get better at something by improving the process. If you get better at the process, the results come off their own accord. But if you don't get better at the process and you keep focusing on the results, you just get mad at yourself. Here's how to implement this. At the end of each morning routine, ask yourself, what quality do I want to bring to this day? Not what do you want to accomplish? What quality of character do you want to embody? Patience, courage, honesty, calm, focus. Choose one word. Write it on a sticky note or set it as your phone wallpaper. When you make decisions throughout the day, filter them through that quality. Would a patient person respond to this email right now? Would a courageous person avoid this conversation? This isn't soft. This is the hardest practice on this list because it means you can no longer blame your circumstances for who you are. Stop chasing results and wondering why you're exhausted. Stop chasing results because you can check every box and still feel empty. You can hit every target and still feel behind. You can win the whole day and still lose yourself doing it. Stop chasing results. The question was never, what did I get done? The question was always, who was I while I did it? And who did I become in pursuit of it? Every ancient tradition, the Vedic sages, the Buddhist monks, the Stoic philosophers, the Zen masters arrived at the same conclusion through radically different paths. The morning is not the beginning of the day. It is the foundation of the self. Modern neuroscience has now confirmed why. Your brain is more receptive, more programmable, and more consequential in those first waking minutes than at any other time. Because the question we've been answering this whole time is who's in charge today? For most of your life, the answer has been your anxiety, your habits, your phone. Starting tomorrow, the answer is you. Not because you say a magic phrase, not because you manifest anything, but because you take the most powerful neurological window your biology gives you, and you fill it with intentional, directed, evidence-based instructions that tell your brain exactly who's running the